The red warning lights flashed across the communication array deep inside Earth's orbital command station. Lieutenant Sarah Williams stared at the incoming transmission data, her coffee growing cold as she processed what she was seeing. The signal had traveled across 17 light-years, bouncing through quantum relay stations that most humans didn't even know existed. Admiral Morrison to the bridge. Sarah spoke into her headset. Her voice remained steady, but her hands shook slightly as she began decoding the alien message. Admiral Kate Morrison arrived within minutes. Her gray hair pulled back in a tight bun and her uniform perfectly pressed despite being woken at 3. In the morning, she had been expecting this call for months. Earth's deep space monitoring stations had been tracking unusual energy signatures from the Viridian sector for weeks. "What do we have, Lieutenant?" Morrison asked, settling into the command chair. Sarah's fingers danced across the holographic interface, pulling up the translated message. "It's from something called the Viridian Coalition, ma'am. They're asking for help." The main screen filled with an image of a tall, pale blue humanoid with large dark eyes and delicate features. When it spoke, the universal translator converted its musical language into flat English words. "People of Earth, we are the Viridian Coalition. Our worlds face destruction. The Korthak Empire has declared war upon our peaceful systems. We have little time before our core worlds fall to their invasion fleets." Morrison leaned forward. She had been studying alien communications intercepts for 15 years. Ever since Earth first detected organized radio signals from space, the Coalition had been sending trade requests and cultural exchanges to dozens of systems. They seemed to believe the galaxy was full of civilized, peaceful species. The alien continued its message. "We offer substantial payment for humanitarian assistance. Our people need medical supplies, food shipments, and transport vessels to evacuate civilians. Can provide rare minerals worth billions of your currency units, plus advanced technology. Blueprints for peaceful applications?" Sarah looked up from her console. "Ma'am, they're offering trilithium crystals and quantum computing matrices. The science division would go crazy for this stuff." Morrison nodded, but her expression remained grim. "Keep playing the message." The blue alien's image flickered as the transmission quality degraded. "We know Earth is a developing world with limited space capabilities, but any aid you can provide would save millions of lives. The Korthak enslave entire populations. They show no mercy to civilians. Please respond quickly. Time is running short." The message ended, leaving the bridge in silence. Sarah waited for orders while Morrison stared at the empty screen. Finally, the Admiral stood and walked to the tactical display showing Earth's orbital defenses. "Lieutenant, get me Captain Blake on the Retribution, Priority 1. "Ma'am, shouldn't we contact the diplomatic corps first? This seems like a job for the aid organization, not the fleet." Morrison turned back to Sarah, her blue eyes cold as winter. The Viridians made one very big mistake in their message. They assumed we're like them. 20 minutes later, Captain Ryan Blake appeared on the communication screen. He was younger than Morrison, with short brown hair and scars on his left cheek from a training accident. Behind him, the bridge of the TDF Retribution hummed with activity. "Admiral, I got your message. Are we finally going active?" Morrison nodded. "The Viridian Coalition just asked Earth for humanitarian aid. They're under attack by something called the Korthak Empire." Blake's expression hardened. "How big is this Korthak force?" "It's unknown, but they've apparently conquered multiple star systems. The Viridians are offering payment for medical supplies and refugee transport. We're sending them what they actually need instead," Blake said. It wasn't a question. Morrison smiled for the first time that night. Prep the Retribution and her escort group. Full combat loadout. I want the destroyers Valiant and Thunder, plus the heavy cruiser Independence. Sarah looked confused. "Ma'am, why are we sending warships to deliver aid supplies?" Morrison pulled up a tactical display showing the Viridian sector. Red markers indicated Korthak fleet positions based on intercepted communications. "Because, Lieutenant, the Viridians don't understand what kind of species they contacted. They think Earth is some peaceful trade world that will send cargo ships full of bandages and food." Blake grinned on the screen. "They have no idea we've been preparing for interstellar war since we first detected their radio signals. Morrison walked over to Sarah's station. Pull up the files on Earth's military development over the past 50 years. Show her what we've been building while the galaxy thought we were primitive. Sarah's screen filled with classified technical specifications, kinetic bombardment systems designed to crack planetary surfaces, fusion warheads that could sterilize continents, assault shuttles built to deploy troops in hostile gravity wells, twice Earth's strength. My God, Sarah whispered. We've been preparing to fight aliens this entire time, not fight them, Morrison corrected. Protect ourselves from them. But when peaceful species ask for help against slavers and conquerors, protection works both ways. Blake checked something off screen. Admiral, how much are we telling the Viridians about our capabilities? Morrison considered this. Nothing. Let them think we're sending aid ships until we arrive. The Korthok Empire needs to learn what happens when they threaten innocent civilians within range of Earth. What about the payment they offered? Sarah asked. Morrison shook her head. We don't do this for profit, Lieutenant. We do it because the galaxy is about to learn that humans don't let bullies operate in our neighborhood. Blake saluted through the screen. Retribution Battle Group will be ready to launch in 6 hours, Admiral. Make it 4 hours, Captain. According to their message, the Viridians don't have much time left. As Blake's image disappeared, Morrison turned to Sarah. Contact Deep Space Tracking. I want continuous monitoring of all communications from the Viridian sector. If the Korthok Empire is intercepting their transmissions, they might try to intercept ours too. Sarah nodded, her fingers already working across the console. Ma'am, what if the Viridians don't want military intervention? What if they really just want medical supplies? Morrison looked out through the viewing port at Earth below, its blue surface crossed with the lights of cities that had survived wars, plagues, and natural disasters for thousands of years. Then they're about to learn the difference between charity and justice, Lieutenant, and so is the rest of the galaxy. Supreme Commander Thoktar stood 8 feet tall on his powerful hind legs, his green scales gleaming under the harsh lights of the Korthok command ship. His yellow eyes studied the tactical display showing human fleet movements through stolen Coalition sensor data. The reptilian warlord's jaw split into what passed for a smile among his species, revealing rows of sharp teeth. So the pathetic Coalition found another weak species to beg for help, Thoktar hissed to his subordinates. These humans send only 4 ships to face the might of the Korthok Empire. His intelligence officer, a smaller Korthok named Vextar, pulled up detailed scans of the approaching human vessels. Commander, their ships appear heavily armed for cargo transports. Perhaps they carry military supplies for the Coalition. Thoktar waved a clawed hand dismissively. All species arm their trade ships when they enter war zones. It means nothing. Look at the size of their fleet. 4 ships against our 300 battle cruisers. They will surrender or die like all the others. The Korthok Empire had conquered 17 star systems in the past decade. Their strategy was simple and effective. They would appear in overwhelming numbers, destroy any military resistance, then enslave the surviving population. Most civilized species surrendered after seeing a few cities burn from orbit. The human ships are not requesting safe passage or announcing peaceful intentions. They have not responded to our warning broadcasts. Because they know they are weak, Thoktar growled. They hope to sneak past our patrols and deliver their useless aid to the Coalition. When we capture their ships, we will learn what pathetic weapons these humans possess. Meanwhile, 3 star systems away, President Lyra Zephyrus of the Viridian Coalition paced nervously in her crystalline office aboard the capital ship Harmony. Her pale blue skin seemed even more translucent under stress, and her large dark eyes reflected the worry that kept her awake for days. General Voss, do we have any update on the human response? She asked her military advisor. General Kane Voss was unusual among Coalition species. His people, the Rigelians, had evolved from predator stock before developing technology and philosophy that led them toward peace. He was broader and more muscular than most Coalition citizens, with gray skin and small ridges along his skull. President, our deep space sensors show the human fleet is maintaining course toward our territory. They have not answered our requests for coordination protocols. Lyra nodded, though her expression remained troubled. Perhaps their communication systems are different from ours. How many refugee ships are they bringing? Voss checked his data pad. That's what concerns me, President. Their fleet composition doesn't match a humanitarian mission. Maybe they're protecting their cargo ships from Korthok raiders, Lyra suggested hopefully. These humans are from a developing world. They probably don't trust their technology to survive without military escort. Voss said nothing, but his warrior instincts told him something was wrong. In his study of galactic warfare, he had learned that most species followed predictable patterns. With local authorities, the human ships did none of these things. President, I recommend we prepare our people for the possibility that the humans may not be what we expect. Lyra looked shocked. General, they answered our call for help. They're risking their lives to bring us aid. Cannot doubt their intentions. I'm not doubting their intentions, Voss replied carefully. I'm questioning our assumptions about their capabilities. Aboard the TDF Retribution, Lieutenant Colonel Amy Rodriguez sat in the intelligence briefing room, surrounded by holographic displays showing Korthok battle formations. She had been studying alien military tactics for 8 years, ever since Earth first detected organized warfare between star systems. Captain Blake, she said into her communicator, I've finished analyzing the Korthok tactical patterns. Captain Blake's voice crackled through the speaker. What's their weakness, Colonel? They've never fought an enemy that doesn't surrender when outnumbered. Their formations are designed for intimidation, not actual combat effectiveness. If we hit them hard and fast, their entire command structure will collapse. Rodriguez pulled up intercepted Korthok communications. Our slave soldiers are forced to fight, not trained warriors. Once they see their masters can be defeated, they'll likely turn on their oppressors. How long until we reach the combat zone? Blake asked. Rodriguez checked the navigation display. 6 hours until we enter Viridian space. The Korthok have a patrol line along the border, but they're not expecting military resistance. Good. Make sure all department heads understand the rules of engagement. We're not here to play galactic politics. We're here to end a threat. Back on the Korthok command ship, Vexstar received updated intelligence reports that made his scales prickle with unease. Commander, I've been analyzing the human ship signatures more carefully. Their energy output is much higher than expected for cargo vessels.
Saga.
Thoktar was studying invasion plans for the Coalition's capital world, all species over-engine there. But Commander, look at their approach vector. They're not heading for Coalition space to deliver supplies. What? Are you suggesting? Thoktar's laugh was a harsh, barking sound. 4 ships against our entire fleet. They would have to be insane. No rational species would attempt such a thing. Vexstar stared at the tactical display, watching the human ships maintain their steady approach toward Korthok territory. Commander, what if they're not rational by our standards? What if there's something else entirely? Impossible, Thoktar declared. All spacefaring species follow the same evolutionary path. President Zephyrus received a priority message from her border stations. General Voss, our sensors show the human fleet will arrive in Coalition space within hours, but they're not heading for our refugee centers or supply depots. Voss felt his warrior instincts screaming warnings. Where are they going, President? The 2 leaders stared at each other in growing realization. The humans weren't coming to deliver aid supplies. They were coming to deliver something else entirely. The Korthok patrol line consisted of 12 heavy cruisers positioned along the edge of Viridian space. They had been there for 3 weeks, blocking any attempt to bring supplies to the Coalition worlds. Commander Zektar commanded the patrol. From his flagship, confident that no enemy would dare challenge their superior numbers, Sir, we have 4 ships approaching our position, reported his sensor operator. They match the human vessels we've been tracking. Zektar moved to the tactical display. The human ships were still 6 hours away, but they showed no signs of changing course or slowing down. Are they broadcasting surrender terms?
No, sir.
They haven't responded to any of our warning signals. Zektar's yellow eyes narrowed. Then they will learn what happens to those who ignore the Korthok Empire. All ships, prepare to intercept. We will capture their vessels and interrogate the crew. Captain Ryan Blake stood on the bridge of the TDF Retribution, watching the enemy. Patrol formation through the tactical display. His ship was the most advanced vessel in Earth's fleet, designed specifically for this moment. Around him, his crew worked with calm efficiency, preparing weapon systems that had never been tested. In real combat, Captain called out his weapons officer, Lieutenant Commander Lisa Parker. We have 12 Korthok vessels in formation ahead. They're moving to intercept us. Blake nodded. Distance? 2 hours at current speed. Signal the fleet. Attack formation Delta. The Thunder and Valiant will engage the outer ships while we... And the Independence hit their center? Parker's fingers danced across her console, bringing the Retribution's main guns online. The ship carried 6 heavy railguns designed to fire tungsten slugs at 30% the speed of light. Each projectile carried enough kinetic energy to crack a mountain. Captain, the Korthok are hailing us, reported the communications officer. Put them through. Commander Zektar's reptilian face appeared on the main screen. Human vessels, you are entering Korthok territory without permission. Surrender immediately or face destruction. Blake stared at the alien commander for a long moment. This is Captain Ryan Blake of the Terran Defense Force. You have exactly one chance to withdraw from Coalition space before we remove you, Zektar. Jaw dropped open in shock. You dare threaten us. You have 12 ships to your 4. I count 12 targets, Blake replied calmly. That should be enough to send a message. The communication channel closed. Blake turned to his crew. All stations, prepare for combat. Remember, we're not just fighting for the Coalition. We're showing the galaxy what happens when you threaten innocent people. Commander Zektar stared at the empty screen in disbelief. Did that human just threaten to attack us? His tactical officer, a nervous young Korthok named Riptor, checked his sensors again. Sir, the human ships are still approaching. They're not slowing down. They must be bluffing, Zektar decided. No species would be foolish enough to attack. When outnumbered 3-1, maintain intercept course. But doubt crept into Zektar's mind as the human ships continued their steady approach. Their formation was perfect, their course never wavering. These didn't look like the actions of frightened cargo haulers, Sir Riptor said, his voice shaking slightly. Their energy signatures are spiking. I think they're charging weapons. President, Lyra Zephyrus stood in the observation deck of the Harmony, watching the distant battle about to unfold. Her military advisor, General Voss, stood beside her with a grim expression. General, shouldn't we warn the humans about the Korthok patrol strength? They're vastly outnumbered. Voss shook his head slowly. President, I don't think the humans are concerned about being outnumbered. Look at their approach pattern. Lyra studied the tactical display. The 4 human ships were spreading into attack formation, their courses aimed directly at the Korthok vessels. They're not trying to avoid the patrol. They're attacking it. President, I think we've made a serious error in our understanding of these humans. The distance between the 2 fleets closed rapidly. Commander Zektar watched his sensors with growing alarm as the human ships refused to change course. All ships, prepare to fire warning shots. Maybe that will convince them to surrender. Sir Riptor reported the human ships are accelerating. They'll reach weapons range in 30 minutes. Zektar felt a chill run down his spine. In all his years of conquest, no enemy had ever maintained an attack run when faced with superior numbers. Signal the fleet. Combat formation. They want to die, we'll accommodate them. The TDF Retribution shuddered as her engines pushed her to maximum speed. Captain Blake felt the familiar weight of high acceleration pressing him into his command. Chair around him, his crew worked with practiced precision. Captain Parker called out, enemy vessels are changing formation. They're preparing to engage. Range. 15 minutes to optimal firing position. Blake opened a channel to the fleet. All ships. This is Retribution. Engage at will when we reach range. Remember, we're not here to capture territory or take prisoners. We're here to eliminate a threat. The destroyer Thunder responded first. Retribution. This is Commander Jake Stevens. Thunder is ready to show these lizards what Earth Steel can do. Blake smiled grimly. The Korthok Empire was about to learn that humans didn't follow the same rules as other species. They didn't surrender when outnumbered. They didn't negotiate with slavers. They fought until the enemy was destroyed or driven away. Commander Zektar watched the human ships close the final distance. All ships fire at will. Destroy them quickly. The Korthok vessels opened fire with their plasma cannons, filling space with streams of superheated energy. The beams lanced toward the human ships, enough firepower to vaporize any normal vessel. But the human ships didn't behave like normal vessels. They twisted and rolled through the plasma fire with impossible agility, their hulls designed to withstand the crushing gravity of Earth itself. The few hits that connected barely scorched their armor. Impossible, Zektar breathed. How are they moving like that? Then the humans returned fire. 6 tungsten slugs left the Retribution's railguns moving. Faster than Korthok sensors could track, the projectiles struck the nearest Korthok cruiser with the force of nuclear weapons, punching through shields and armor like they were made of paper. The Korthok ship exploded in a brilliant flash of light, its reactor core breached by the kinetic impact. 11 ships remained. What just happened? Zektar screamed. How did they destroy the Marok so easily? Before anyone could answer, the human destroyer Thunder opened fire on 2 more Korthok vessels. Her smaller railguns sent streams of tungsten penetrators into the enemy ships, shredding their hulls and leaving them dead in space. 9 ships remained. Commander Zektar finally understood. The humans weren't delivering aid to the Coalition. They were delivering death to the Korthok Empire. News of the patrol line's destruction reached Supreme Commander Thoktar within hours. The massive Korthok leader stood in his war room, staring at the tactical display that showed nothing but empty space where 12 of his ships used to be. His claws scraped against the metal table as rage built inside his chest. 12 ships, he growled to his staff officers. 12 ships destroyed by 4 human vessels. How is this possible? Intelligence Officer Vextar pulled up the sensor. Recordings from the battle? Commander, the human weapons appear to be kinetic projectiles moving at incredible speeds. Our shields were designed to stop energy weapons, not solid objects traveling at 30% light speed. Thoktar watched the recording of his ships being torn apart by tungsten slugs. Each human shot punched through Korthok armor like it was made of thin metal. What kind of species builds weapons like this? A species that fights wars on a planet with heavy gravity, said a new voice from the entrance. Dr. Elena Brooks walked into the Korthok war room, flanked by 2 human marines in full combat armor. She had been captured 3 days earlier when her research ship was seized by a Korthok patrol. Thoktar turned his yellow eyes toward the human scientist. So the prisoners finally speak. Tell me, human, why did your people attack my patrol line? Dr. Brooks adjusted her glasses and looked around the room. She had spent her entire career studying alien biology and culture, but seeing the Korthok Command Center up close confirmed her worst fears about their society. Because you're slavers, she said simply. On Earth we have a saying, the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. Thoktar's jaw split into a cruel smile. Your 4 ships cannot defeat my entire fleet. I have 300 warships under my command, Commander Vextar interrupted, checking. His communications panel were receiving reports from our occupied worlds. Something is happening. Dr. Brooks smiled back at the Korthok leader. That would be Major Turner and his ground teams. You see, we didn't just bring ships to this fight. On the planet Zarian, formerly a peaceful coalition world that had been under Korthok occupation for 6 months, the night sky suddenly filled with streaking lights. Dozens of human drop pods crashed into the planet's surface around the slave labor camps and military installations. Major Scott Turner kicked open his pod's door and stepped onto alien soil. Around him, his assault team checked their weapons and equipment. They had trained for this moment for years, studying Korthok tactics and learning how to fight in different gravity environments. Alpha Team, secure the communications tower. Turner spoke into his helmet radio. Bravo Team, liberate the detention centers. Charlie Team, neutralize the garrison. The Korthok guards at the nearest slave camp had never faced human soldiers. They were used to keeping frightened civilians in line, not fighting trained warriors from a death world. When the humans attacked, the guards found themselves facing opponents who moved faster, hit harder, and fought with a ferocity they had never experienced. Turner led his team through the camp's outer defenses. The Korthok weapons were designed to intimidate and control, not to fight serious battles. Human body armor, built to protect soldiers on Earth's harsh surface, easily absorbed their energy blasts. "Sir," called Sergeant Amy Davis through the radio, "we've reached the detention center. There are about 2,000 Coalition civilians here. Free them and arm anyone who wants to fight back," Turner ordered. "It'd show them how to use captured Korthok weapons." The liberated civilians stared in amazement as human soldiers handed them enemy weapons and began teaching them basic combat tactics. Most had never held a weapon in their lives, but desperation and anger made them quick learners. Back in space, President Lyra Zephyros received reports from multiple occupied worlds. Her pale blue skin had turned almost white with shock as she read the intelligence summaries. "General Voss, the humans have deployed ground forces to 17 different planets simultaneously. How is this possible with only 4 ships?"
What?
General Voss studied the tactical reports with growing respect for human military planning. "President, I don't think those were cargo ships disguised as warships. I think they were troop transports disguised as cargo ships." The report showed human soldiers liberating slave camps, destroying Korthok supply depots, and teaching former prisoners how to fight their oppressors. More disturbing for the Korthok Empire, the humans seemed to understand exactly how their occupation system worked and where to strike for maximum effect. Dr. Brooks watched Thoktar read the same reports. The Supreme Commander's rage was giving way to something she had never seen in a Korthok before: fear. "Your soldiers are fighting on 17 worlds at the same time," Thoktar said. "How many troops did you bring?" "Enough," Brooks replied. "But that's not the real problem you're facing. The real problem is that we're not just fighting your occupation forces. We're teaching your slaves how to fight back." On Zarian, Major Turner's teams had linked up with liberated Coalition civilians and captured Korthok soldiers who had surrendered rather than face human assault troops. The Major stood in what used to be the garrison commander's office now, serving as a coordination center for the growing rebellion. "Sir," reported Sergeant Davis, "we've established contact with resistance groups on 12 other worlds. They're asking for tactical support." Turner nodded. "Patch me through to all of them." The communication screen filled with faces from a dozen different species, all former slaves who had been freed by human intervention.
Oh.
Turner looked at each of them before speaking. "People of the Coalition, this is Major Turner of the Terran Defense Force. We came here to help, but we can't stay forever. If you want to stay free, you need to learn how to keep yourselves free." A Viridian civilian named Jorik spoke first. "Major, we don't know how to fight. Our people have been peaceful for centuries." "Then we'll teach you," Turner replied. "Understand this. Freedom isn't something that gets handed to you. It's something you have to earn and defend every single day." Supreme Commander Thoktar received the final report that made his blood run cold. His occupation forces on 19 worlds had either surrendered, been destroyed, or joined the rebellion against his empire. The humans hadn't just attacked his military. They had dismantled his entire system of control. Commander Vextar said quietly, "Perhaps we should consider negotiating with these humans." Thoktar's claws extended to their full length. "Never. I will show them what happens when someone challenges the Korthok Empire." Dr. Brooks heard the exchange and shook her head. "Commander, you still don't understand what you're dealing with. We're not another civilized species that will negotiate with slavers. We're apex predators from a death world, and we've decided you're a threat that needs to be eliminated." The human fleet moved deeper into Korthok territory with methodical precision. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of her command ship, watching the tactical display show the collapse of an empire that had taken decades to build. Behind her, intelligence officers tracked the liberation of world after world as human ground forces taught former slaves how to fight back. Admiral reported Captain Blake over the communication channel, "We've reached the outer defenses of the Korthok home system. They have a defensive fleet of 80 ships waiting for us." Morrison studied the enemy positions. The Korthok had pulled back their scattered forces and were making their final stand around their homeworld. "How many ships do we have in attack position for main battle vessels, plus 12 support craft that joined us from liberated Coalition?" "Worlds," Blake replied. Morrison smiled. The Coalition ships were crewed by former slaves who had learned human tactics and now wanted revenge against their oppressors. Signaled the fleet. We advance in 1 hour. On the liberated world of Arcturus Prime, President Lyra Zephyrus walked through the ruins of what had been a slave processing center just weeks ago. The pale blue coalition leader was accompanied by Commander Jake Stevens, who had been coordinating reconstruction efforts while his ship underwent repairs. Commander Stevens, I must ask you something that has been troubling me, Lyra said as they passed a group of former slaves learning to operate captured Korthok weapons. Your people could have simply destroyed the Korthok fleet and left. Why are you teaching us to defend ourselves? Stevens stopped walking and looked at the training groups around them. Former prisoners from a dozen different species were working together, sharing knowledge and building bonds that would last generations. President, on Earth we learned a hard lesson thousands of years ago. If you want peace, you have to be prepared for war. If you want freedom, you have to be willing to fight for it every single day. Lyra watched a young Viridian civilian successfully field strip a Korthok rifle under the guidance of a human sergeant. But we are peaceful people. We've never had to think about military matters. That's exactly why the Korthok Empire was able to enslave you so easily, Stevens replied. They counted on your peaceful nature. They knew you wouldn't fight back. The president considered this as they continued walking. And now you're changing. U.S. You're making us into something we've never been before. Stevens nodded. We're making you into something the galaxy has never seen before. A coalition of species that can defend themselves and protect others. In the depths of space, the Korthok defensive fleet waited in formation around their homeworld. Supreme Commander. Thoktar had moved his flag to the massive dreadnought destroyer of worlds, the largest warship in the Korthok arsenal. Around him, his remaining officers prepared for what they knew might be their final battle. Commander reported his tactical officer. The human fleet is approaching. They have 16 ships total. Thoktar's yellow eyes gleamed with desperate hope. Finally, reasonable odds. 80 ships against 16. Even these Deathworld humans cannot overcome such numbers. But Intelligence Officer Vexstar had been studying human tactics for weeks. Commander, they've never cared about numerical superiority. Look at their formation. The human ships were advancing in a tight group, with the coalition vessels protected in the center, but their approach pattern was unlike anything in Korthok tactical manuals. They weren't trying to outflank or outmaneuver the defensive fleet. They were driving straight through the center like a spear thrust. Colonel Rodriguez worked at her intelligence station aboard the Retribution, coordinating with contacts throughout Korthok space. Captain Blake, I'm receiving reports from our ground teams on occupied worlds. The Korthok garrison forces are beginning to mutiny. Blake looked up from his tactical display. Mutiny? Slave soldiers are turning on their Korthok officers. Apparently, seeing humans defeat their empire has convinced them that their masters aren't invincible after all. On the Korthok homeworld, similar scenes were playing out in military bases and slave quarters across the planet. Alien soldiers, who had been forced to fight for the empire, were now turning their weapons on their oppressors. The psychological foundation of Korthok power was crumbling, Dr. Brooks watched these developments from her cell aboard Thokar's flagship. Her Korthok guards had become increasingly nervous as reports flooded in about the collapsing empire. She could hear them talking in hushed voices about whether they should surrender before the humans arrived. Dr. Brooks, one of the guards finally said, "Is it true that humans show mercy to prisoners who surrender?" Brooks looked at the young Korthok soldier. He couldn't be more than 20 years old by human standards, probably conscripted into service. Like so many others, that depends. Are you a slaver, or are you just another victim of this empire? The guard's scales shifted color, a sign of emotional distress among his species. I never wanted to fight. My family was threatened if I didn't serve. Then you're not our enemy, Brooks replied. Humans don't punish victims. We punish those who create victims. The space battle began when the human fleet reached optimal firing range. The Korthok opened fire first, filling the void with plasma beams and missile swarms. But the humans had learned from their previous encounters. Their ships moved in coordinated patterns that confused Korthok targeting systems, while their heavy armor absorbed hits that would destroy normal vessels. The Retribution's main guns spoke with thunder that echoed across space. Tungsten slugs traveling at incredible speed punched through Korthok shields and hulls, each shot destroying or crippling an enemy vessel. The Coalition ships, crewed by beings with nothing left to lose, fought with desperate courage that surprised even their human allies, reported the weapons officer to Thoktar. We've lost 30 ships in the first exchange. Humans are barely damaged. Thoktar watched his fleet being systematically destroyed by an enemy that refused to follow the rules of civilized warfare. Signal all ships. Full attack. Ramming speed if necessary. But even as he gave the order, Thoktar knew it was useless. The humans weren't just better fighters. They had turned his own empire against him. Reports were coming in from across Korthok. Space about rebellions, mutinies, and entire worlds declaring independence. Admiral Morrison watched the enemy fleet's desperate charge with cold eyes. All ships, prepare for final engagement. Remember, we're not just ending a battle. We're ending an empire. The human fleet opened fire again, and space filled with the light of dying ships. But this time, the light represented more than just military victory. It represented the death of tyranny and the birth of something new in the galaxy, supreme. Commander Thoktar felt his flagship shudder under human fire. Around him, his bridge crew was abandoning their posts as the ship's systems failed one by one. The destroyer of worlds, pride of the Korthok fleet, was being torn apart by weapons designed on a distant death world. Commander Vexter said, his voice barely audible over the sounds of destruction. Perhaps it's time to surrender. Thoktar looked at the tactical display showing the remains of his once mighty fleet. 50 years of conquest ended in a matter of hours by a species that fought like demons and showed mercy like angels. Signal the human fleet, he said finally. 6 months after the surrender of Supreme Commander Thoktar, the galaxy looked very different. Admiral Morrison stood in the conference room of New Geneva Station, humanity's first diplomatic outpost in Coalition space. Through the large windows, she could see ships from dozens of worlds docking at the station's ports. Former slave species were learning to work together as equals for the first time in generations. "Admiral," said Captain Blake as he entered the room. "The Galactic Council representatives have arrived. They want to discuss humanity's application for membership." Morrison nodded. The council had taken months to decide how to handle the species that had single-handedly dismantled the Korthok Empire. Some council members were grateful for human intervention. Others were terrified of what humans might do next. President Lyra Zephyrus entered the conference room, followed by representatives from the newly liberated worlds. Her pale blue skin had regained its healthy color, and her large dark eyes showed confidence instead of fear. "Admiral Morrison," Lyra said, extending her hand in the human gesture of greeting she had learned to appreciate, "I bring greetings from the reformed Coalition Council. We have something to present to you." Behind her came a procession of beings. From species that had been enslaved by the Korthok Empire, there were the gray-skinned Regelians, the insect-like Montari, the crystalline Luxans, and dozens of others. Each carried a formal document. General Kane Voss stepped forward. "Admiral, these are formal requests for military training partnerships. Every liberated world wants to learn human defensive tactics." Morrison accepted the documents, though she had expected this development. "General, we're honored by your trust. But are your people prepared for what military training involves?" "We understand it won't be easy," Lyra replied. "But we also understand that freedom requires strength. The galaxy has learned that lesson the hard way. On the planet that had once been the Korthok homeworld, now renamed Liberation, Major Turner supervised the final dismantling of the Empire's slave training facilities. The planet's new government, made up of former prisoners from across the galaxy, had voted to destroy every symbol of their former oppression. Major called Sergeant Davis. "We finished clearing the last detention center. What should we do with the Korthok military equipment?" Turner looked at the massive stockpiles of weapons and vehicles that had once been used to terrorize innocent civilians. Distribute it to the planetary defense forces. But make sure they understand these are defensive weapons only. Around him, former slaves worked alongside human soldiers to build something unprecedented in galactic history, a world where dozens of species work together as equals, protected by their own strength rather than the mercy of others. Dr. Brooks emerged from the former Imperial archives, carrying data tablets filled with intelligence about other threats in the galaxy. Major, you need to see this. Turner reviewed the data with growing concern. The archive showed evidence of at least 3 other aggressive empires operating in distant sectors, all following similar patterns of conquest and enslavement. Doctor, this information needs to get back to Admiral Morrison immediately. Back on New Geneva Station, the Galactic Council meeting was reaching its climax. Councillor Thren of the Altarian Republic spoke for the moderate faction. The human species has demonstrated both military capability and moral restraint. We believe they would be valuable members of the galactic community. But Councillor Vex of the Hegemony Worlds disagreed. They destroyed an entire empire in a matter of weeks. What happens when they decide another species threatens their interests? Admiral Morrison stood to address the council. Councillors, I understand your concerns. Humans are indeed capable of great violence. But we use that violence only to protect those who cannot protect themselves? How can we be certain of your peaceful intentions? Asked Councillor Vex. Morrison gestured to the window, where ships from liberated worlds were docking at the station, because we had the power to conquer this entire sector, and instead we chose to teach others how to defend themselves. President Lyra spoke from her seat in the gallery. Councillors, before the humans arrived, my people were being loaded into slave ships. Now we have our own defense fleet and are helping other species build theirs. If humans wanted to conquer us, they could have done it months ago. Captain Blake received an urgent message on his communication device. He leaned over to whisper to Admiral Morrison. Ma'am, we just received intelligence from the Liberation Archives. There are other predator empires out there. Morrison nodded slightly, but continued addressing the council. We didn't come to this sector seeking territory or resources. We came because innocent people asked for help. That's what humans do. Councillor Thren consulted with his colleagues before speaking again. Admiral Morrison, the Galactic Council, is prepared to offer humanity full membership with all rights and responsibilities that entails. We accept, Morrison replied, with one condition. The council chamber fell silent. Councillor Vex leaned forward. What condition? Any species that enslaves others or commits genocide against civilian populations will be considered an enemy of humanity. We won't tolerate another Korthok empire, regardless of their political connections or trade agreements. The silence stretched for long moments before Councillor Thren smiled. Admiral, I believe the galaxy has been waiting for someone to say those words for a very long time. 3 months later, Captain Blake stood on the observation deck of the newly commissioned TCS Defender, the first ship built through human coalition cooperation. The vessel combined human weapons technology with coalition defensive systems and alien crew members working alongside human officers. Captain reported his new executive officer, a Rigelian named Commander Jorik, were receiving a distress call from the Outer Rim territories. Something called the Hegemony of Pain is attacking civilian targets. Blake smiled grimly, signaled the fleet. It looks like the galaxy needs our help again. In her office aboard New Geneva Station, Admiral Morrison reviewed reports from across known space. Human military advisors were training defense forces on 47 worlds. Former slave species were forming mutual defense pacts. And somewhere in the outer darkness, new threats were learning that the galaxy was no longer defenseless. She opened a communication channel to Earth. Terra Command, this is Admiral Morrison. Request permission to establish the Galactic Defense Initiative. We have work to do. The response came back within hours. Earth had been monitoring galactic communications and was already preparing to send additional fleets. The message was simple: permission granted. Show them what humanity stands for. Morrison looked out at the stars, knowing that somewhere among them, innocent people were suffering under the rule of tyrants. The galaxy had learned that there were species willing to fight for justice, even when it meant traveling across the void to face unknown enemies. The humans had answered one call for help and changed everything. Now, they were ready to answer the next call and the one after that. For as long as evil existed among the stars, President Lyra stood beside her.
Oh.
Both women watching ships launch from the station toward distant trouble spots. Admiral, what do you think the galaxy will look like in 10 years? Morrison considered the question. Free, President. Whatever it costs, whatever we have to face, the galaxy will be free.